Everyone, I wanted to share a little bit about the Millennium Tower in San Francisco. If you haven't seen it on the news, it's called the Leaning Tower of San Francisco, the Millennium Tower. And there's quite a bit of history there which is not really mentioned that I just wanted to touch on, and really it's got some fantastic aspects to it. It's not fantastic that a building's tipping, but that's obviously out of any man's hands at this point, isn't it, right? It's just a fantastic lead up to some of the events that have happened. And I wrote a book years ago, Vegetable Garden, Faith and a Corvette, and it's been written about 10 years ago. And a lot of the background of this is in that book. So if you have interest, you're welcome to get onto that book. If you don't have a way, you can let me know, and I can send you an electronic copy of that. But in essence, the Millennium Partners that own that, in this book, it talks about a vision. And this is probably where it gets wonderful. You know, we turned up in Boston many years ago for what we're starting to see unfold in the US now with the Freedom Convoys. It's just seeing vision of cities being changed with a freedom that only God can bring. And that kind of led to a building and to help facilitate that. And I remember talking with Millennium Partners, and it was a real journey over probably a couple of years with them. And I won't go into all the detail of that. If you have any interest in that, you can read the book. But a lot of the partners, they'd be aware of my name and the journey of what happened there. But in that journey, we went across to San Francisco as they were developing what now is the Leaning Tower of San Francisco. And I remember trying to contact them, sending them a word that God wanted this building. They had a Paramount Theatre in Boston that they were not using and said they didn't want. And I'll get to that, but I remember very clearly sending them a check each partner for a few $100s, just, and with a word that's saying you probably need to put this aside as a symbol, right? It represented something from God, that if you continue to fight God, it won't end well financially for you, and which is kind of absurd, really. I mean, who sends a couple $100s to multi-millionaires, if not billionaires? Went back to Boston, spent 2 or 3 months living in their development next door to the Paramount Theatre. And in the course of that, my last contact with them was with a man, or second last contact, was with a man called Joe Larkin, which was MDA Partners at the time in Boston, had partnered with Millennium Partners to develop properties in Boston. And I remember standing with that man in the foyer of his, his office, and his words to me were, "Scott, we want to give that building away, but we would never give that to anything to do with God." He said, "We'd give it to a nightclub, we'd give it to a school, we'd give it to anything, but we will never give that to God." And I remember looking at that man and just saying, well, I guess I'll have to let God do my fighting for me, and walked out of their lives. And then probably 6 months ago, I sent another word after I started to see that the building was tipping in San Francisco, that they were laying the foundations for it at the time when we said, I'll let God do our fighting for us. Now you can say, this is, well, whatever you say is up to you, but to me it's a fantastic demonstration that God is God, and no man can outdo that. And 6 months ago, I sent another word, emailed it to their office, just saying, look, you know, if this is God, the building's going to move another inch in the opposite direction. And then we get this article that I have on there from YouTube, NBC, talking about how the building has just moved an inch, exactly an inch, horizontally. So I wanted to put this video together because there's so much talk around the Millennium Tower, and a lot of people's lives are being affected by that, and I'm not happy that people having this sort of thing happen, but I think I'm just raising a voice to say these men knew. They knew. Well, Joe Larkin gave the word that said, there's no way we'll do any of this for God. And so I just probably am inviting, again, these folks to revisit that. Maybe there is the possibility that you're fighting God. And if you're fighting God in that, history shows who wins. This is not about me. This is about what God's doing in the United States of America. And if you want to know the history of it and more about the story, the book is there, Vegetable Garden Faith and a Corvette. It's 10, 11 years old now, but it has a lot of the history of that, and you can decide for yourself. But to me, what a fantastic journey.